As we continue our studies in the book of Exodus, we come today to chapter 2 and verses 11 through to 23. Many years of Moses' life have been passed over in silence between verses 10 and 11. However, from what we subsequently learn, it's clear that two very important things must have taken place during these lost years. Nursed by a believing mother, Moses must have been taught the promises of God and come to perceive, as Jochebed must have done, that he was being equipped to be the deliverer of God's people. Then, trained as a prince in the royal palace, he must have received teaching and experience which would enable him to lead the large number of Israelites. Eventually, perhaps impatient for the glorious task which he envisaged for himself, Moses went out to visit what are described as his own people in verse 11. Apparently he was over anxious to prove himself to them, for seeing a dispute between an Egyptian, the Hebrew, or an Israelite, he murdered the Egyptian. No motive is given for this act of killing. Moses, it seems, was only concerned to prove himself to his own people. But the right of leadership is not one that can be assumed. It must be earned. And this is a lesson which Moses had not yet learned. The following day he went out again to visit his people, and this time saw two Israelites squabbling. Perhaps somewhat arrogantly, Moses intervened. The response he received not only indicates that the murder he had committed was known, but also that the people were not ready yet for his leadership. In fear of his life, and with his dreams shattered, Moses had then to flee out into the wilderness country. The sequel is both romantic and tragically pathetic. His act of heroism in helping the daughters of the priest of Midian led to him finding a home and a wife. At the same time, however, his sadness is apparent when Moses names his first son Gershom. Wistfully, he reflects that he had become an alien in a strange land. And Moses, a man whose friends had been courtiers and who might have expected to marry an Egyptian princess, was married to a simple shepherdess who shared none of his culture, tastes, memories or dreams. During the years that followed, Moses must have often felt that all his training and leading by God had been a complete waste of time. And yet things were happening. Perhaps only dimly understood by Moses then, the name Gershom also indicates that Moses had renounced Egypt. In the future he would not look to the skills and the training of Egypt, valuable as though they proved to be, but to the Lord alone. Moses was also learning the most vital lesson for all good leaders. He was suffering in such a way as would enable him best to serve those suffering Israelites whom he was called to lead. It's been well said that part of the price God himself would one day have to pay in order to reconcile the world to himself was the suffering of the Son of God. He had to become poor that we might become rich. And what was true both of Moses and Jesus is true for all those who would walk in their footsteps. From God's point of view, these apparently wasted years were a further necessary and final step in the equipping of Moses to be the leader of God's people.